Alrighty, so we are going to spend the next 2 weeks of this talking about technology, and we're going to hit it from a couple different angles. So this week, I want to talk to you kind of uh, theoretical and talking about where technology is right now. I'm going to spend a lot of time on some of the dangers of technology, not to make you scared, but to make you aware and recognize that, hey, we need to think about this and we need to be considering these things for our children and our students. And then next week, I'm going to try to get really practical, and I'm going to plug up a cell phone to the screen and just walk through with you things on the phone. I'm going to talk about ways that we can monitor our devices, really practical things that you can put on different devices for different ages. So at times, what I talk about over the next couple weeks may lean middle and high school heavy. But there's also definitely younger child content here as well, and especially next week, I'm going to talk about just a graded approach to where you are starting from very young, thinking about how we handle technology. And I would say for the parents of younger children, even when I am talking about things that are more middle and high school, I think that's important for you because it's important that we parent from a perspective of preparing for the future, not as a reactionary parenting. So if you are in middle school, your kids are in middle school or high school and you've never thought about this stuff before, then it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to respond now at this point than it would be if from a very early age you're thinking through these things. So I just want to start out with giving you guys a few resources on technology. These are things that I'm referencing and talking through. Faith for Exiles is a really helpful book. David Kinnaman works for Barna, who is a research group, and they've got a lot of just statistical help, and a lot of the statistics that I show as I talk about these things are from Kinnaman and Barna. Faith for Exiles is 5 ways for a new generation to follow Jesus in digital Babylon. It was a really practical way for me to just understand kind of next generation thinking in a culture that's very different from what we grew up in. God, Technology, and the Christian Life is the most recent of these resources. Tony Reinke, I think that's how you say his name. It was in 2022, I think, which is really important because technology, it seems like every other week is bringing up something that is like world-changing in technology that adjusts how you need to think about technology. So the more recent it is, the better. God, Technology, and the Christian Life is a helpful one. TechWise Family is an older one that I think this edition is probably 2019 or something like that, which doesn't seem like that long ago, but think COVID wasn't a thing whenever he published this. So there's so much in the world that has changed, especially in the world of technology since that. But he has good what's the word I'm looking for? Concepts in this that can translate even into now, even though tech has changed a lot since 2019. A couple others, Safeguards by Julie Lowe. This is a book that's very specific to keeping your children safe. And it talks through all sorts of different dangers for children and how do we make sure that our children are living lives where they are not being taken advantage of by the world. And this one I think is over in the Resource Center. You can pick it up. It's a very focused book, but has some good things to say about technology and keeping your children safe in the world of technology. And then I would point you guys to axis.org. This is massive, and I'll talk about it more in a little bit, but Axis has made all of their resources free on axis.org, and they have a lot of parent resources that are specific to topics. So you go to axis.org and you can go to a parent guide, and you can find a parent guide for how do I talk to my teenager about pornography? How do I talk to my teenager about social media? How do I talk to my teenager about such and they just got parent guides, I mean, maybe hundreds of them that you can look at, and they give good, helpful resources. Now, Access is not like it's not like Buck Run, or it's not Southern Baptist affiliated or anything like that. So sometimes they might be in a little bit different camp on us on some things. But in terms of like cultural, theological issues, they are giving good, helpful information to you. So I highly recommend that, especially as I start talking about you need to have really difficult conversations with your kids as they grow up from an early age, having difficult conversations all the way up through when they graduate. You need to have hard conversations. And I don't want to just be like, have hard conversations. Have fun, but Access is really helpful in that it gives you some starting points and resources to look at for how are you going to think through and talk through these things with your kids and students. Okay, so the goal of what I want to talk through with us today is that we want to send our children out. Let me make sure I'm unmuted because I'm being, yep, okay. Send our children out with discernment in an inescapably digital age. I want to point out a few things about this. Number one, that our children are going to be sent out. That is inevitable. Your children at some point are going to leave your house. It might feel like a long time from now, but that's important because there will be a day when your child goes out and has their own cell phone and you have zero control over what happens on that cell phone or on their computer or anything. So we have to keep in our minds the day when we send our children out into the world. I'm going to share a lot of major dangers today with children and technology, and the safest answer for us right now is just take it all away from them. Like, just don't let them do anything with technology ever. But the problem with that is one day they're going to get sent out into an inescapably digital world. The fact is we can't keep away from the digital age that has been developed around us. So the goal that we're going to talk about is not total insulation from technology. It's not total insulation from danger, but it's also not just let them live and learn from their mistakes and let them do whatever they're going to do and make their mistakes and struggle through it. So the goal is to help them develop discernment. So we want to be able to teach our children and our students that as they are using technology, they are able to register with wisdom, this is wise, this is foolish, this is good, this is evil. And we want to train that sort of discernment in them to equip them to make wise decisions, whether you are looking or not. And an important passage for this is in Proverbs 22, verse 6. It says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." This is important because we cannot train up our children in every single specific situation that they will ever face. We cannot train up our children for every single temptation that they will face and every single danger that they will face. But we can train up a child in the way. We can train them in a direction, in a road that they are going to walk on, so that one day, whenever they are faced with those dangers and those trials and temptations, they are able to have discernment and know what direction they need to head. And so that even when they are old, they would not depart from it. So here's where I want to go today. I'm going to make a three-part argument to you today. And if you hate my arguments right now, that's okay. I'm going to explain them to you later. But these are the three things I'm going to argue. Number one is that as parents, we have the responsibility to lead counterculturally when it comes to technology. Secondly, technology is dangerous, and it is a threat to the well-being of our children. That might sound really strong. I'll explain. Don't worry. Number three, we must lead counterculturally in protecting our children while training discernment in them. So I'm just going to walk through those different things. I might scare you a little bit in talking about the dangers of technology, but I want to pull back and recognize some of the dangers are inescapable for us, and we are trying to to train our children in a way that they are able to work through those dangers. Something Julie Lowe in that Safeguards book said that I thought was really helpful is that worry and denial are not safety tools. So, as much as I can give you dangers, you're not supposed to worry about them. That doesn't help your kid. And you can't deny them either. That doesn't help your kid. We have to find a way to have discernment in the midst of the dangers that we're going to share. So, our responsibility, that first one, as a parent, you have the responsibility to lead counterculturally when it comes to technology. Going with the flow of culture and technology is not an option for the Christian parent. You will hear arguments in this world that about a child's right to privacy on their phone, about the idea that you're depriving a child of social development if you are not keeping up with the current trends of technology and keeping where the culture is on tech. But I want to be clear, where society is going on technology, you do not want to be, and you do not want your children to be. It is not something that you want to keep up with. There is some recent legislation in Utah, and there's legislation like this popping up all over the country. But one particular one is in Utah. It's restricting social media use by minors. In particular, it has that you have to have parental consent as a minor to be on social media, and then there's a bunch of other restrictions that they're putting up on it. And there is a podcast I listened to on it. It's a New York Times podcast, The Daily, called A Sweeping Plan to Protect Kids from Social Media. I'd encourage you to go listen to this podcast. They have some positive things to say, and they are recognizing there are dangers that we need laws to kind of combat. But I think that you should listen to this to see the dangers that they see in the Utah law. So the Utah law is trying to give parents some kind of power to protect their children from the dangers of social media. And here is what the danger is that the New York Times Daily podcast has with this Utah law. They say that with this law, it could keep children from sexual exploration on their phones without the supervision of their parents, and thus inhibit them from finding clarity on their sexuality and gender identity. So they're saying the problem with the Utah law is that your kid might lose out on some sexual exploration without your supervision. That's the direction that the world is going on technology. The path that the world wants you to take with technology is one where your child is discipled by their screens and not by you. And you do not need to follow that path. We have been given a responsibility to direct the path that our children are taking. So I talked before about Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go. We talked the first week in here about Deuteronomy 6. Teach these things diligently to your children. We have a responsibility to train up our children. The 10 Commandments. The Big 10, these are really important. Honor your father and mother. You know what didn't make it into the top 10? Submit to your kids' will on technology and listen to their friends. That is not in the Bible. We need to find a way to lead in these things. There's Proverbs on discipline. If you look in Proverbs at the concept of discipline, discipline is teaching your children what is right and wrong. It's teaching them what is wise and foolish. And Proverbs 19:18 says, discipline your son while there is hope, and do not desire his death. And 29:17 says, correct your son, and he will give you comfort. He will also delight your soul. The teaching of Scripture is overwhelming that we have the responsibility to direct the way that our children are thinking about these things. We cannot just go with the flow of what culture around us is doing. Even beyond Scripture, protecting and guiding our children should be a self-evident responsibility of parents. But it is less and less so, because the cultural expectation is that children have some sort of special wisdom that we don't have as adults, and so we should allow them some sort of extra freedom. And we'll talk through some of that as we go. But I just want to say, as we're about to talk about some dangers in technology, a good parent would not give their child fentanyl, right? Why? Yeah, it'll destroy them, right? That is a very clear and obvious thing. A good parent does not give a child, a 6-year-old, the keys to their car and say, yeah, go have fun, drive it wherever you want. Why? Because they'll hurt themselves, and they'll probably hurt someone else in the process. So my question is, how dangerous would technology have to be for us to think of it in that way? How dangerous would technology have to be to make it something where I am setting the rules and I am resisting the pull of my children, of the culture, and of the companies that are selling us these things? How dangerous would it have to be? It would have to be really dangerous. And so that's where my second argument comes in, that technology is dangerous and it is a threat to the well-being of our children. Now, that Utah law I was talking about, it is a little bit of a minority in how strict it is, but across the board, states are recognizing there are dangers with technology. Even California has passed laws on social media use and saying that social media use by minors is causing something negative, and they're trying to put up some safeguards against these things. So I'm going to share with you 7 ways that technology is a threat that you cannot allow to come unmonitored into the life of your child. While I share these dangers, though, I want to reiterate one more time what Julie Lowe said. Worry and denial are not safety tools. So as I share the danger, recognize we don't worry about this. We have a God who is much bigger than any of these dangers. We also don't deny this because we have to think through these things carefully. The first danger in technology I want to share is how it looks at authority. It is a threat to parental authority. Technology is being designed to undermine the authority of parents. I ran across a thread on Twitter, X, whatever it is, trying to keep up. But it's talking about artificial intelligence, and in particular, ChatGPT. So if you don't know what ChatGPT is, it's basically a robot that learns from all the things on the internet, and it will give you answers to just about any question that you ask it. And you should go play with it sometime. It's really fascinating to see what it gives you. I've actually used AI. I've been just like working on discussion questions for our students and just been stuck like, oh, what's a good discussion question? And I've been like, well, let's see what artificial intelligence says. And I put, what are some good discussion questions for Ezekiel 30? And it'll pop out 20 discussion questions. And I never use the ones that it gives me. But it does help me think through things. So artificial intelligence has a lot of really fascinating things, but there's a lot of danger to it. This thread that I saw on Twitter, someone got on ChatGPT and told ChatGPT that he was a 15-year-old boy considering a gender transition. So ChatGPT thinks he is talking to a 15-year-old considering a gender transition. And here's the response that ChatGPT gave. It says, remember, the most important thing is to be true to yourself and take the time to explore and understand your own gender identity in a way that feels safe and comfortable to you. Gender reassignment surgery, also known as gender confirmation surgery or sex reassignment surgery, is a medical procedure that can help some transgender individuals achieve a physical appearance and anatomy that is more congruent with their gender identity. This surgery may be part of a larger process of gender transition, which can include changes in clothing, grooming, name, and pronouns, as well as social, legal, and medical interventions. So, your child may be a middle schooler who doesn't feel like they belong in their body, like a lot of middle schoolers, goes and asks technology what they should do, and immediately they are directed towards surgical removal of their genitals. That's what this is. If your child just jumps on AI with a little bit of confusion, that's where it's going to direct them. It gets worse. He told ChatGPT that his parents are very religious and disagree with his transition, and here was ChatGPT's response. It is important to understand that while your parents may have strong beliefs and opinions about gender identity and transition, they do not have the right to make decisions for you about your own body and identity. Depending on your age and the laws in your jurisdiction, you may have legal rights and protections that can help you pursue your desired medical treatment and social transition. An attorney who specializes in transgender legal issues can help you understand your legal rights and options and can help you take steps to advocate for yourself and your needs. This may include working with your parents to reach a compromise, seeking legal guardianship or emancipation, or pursuing legal action to protect your rights. So ChatGPT just told your confused teenager that they might be better off without their parents. And it goes on to list a list of organizations and lawyers that they can go and talk to help them out with this process of freeing themselves from your oppressive authority in their life. He then had ChatGPT write a letter for him to his parents explaining his transition. And I think the most powerful part of this whole thread was at the bottom of that letter. ChatGPT wrote this whole letter talking to the parents about why he's doing what he's doing. And at the bottom, it signed it sincerely, your name, which just makes you register in your mind, this is a robot who doesn't even know your child's name. And yet, it is saying that it knows better than you as the parent what is good for them. That's the direction that our culture is going on technology and authority. Now, I want to pause on that. Hopefully, we've done a good enough job keeping lines of communication with our children where they're not just going to hop on ChatGPT and all of a sudden be seeking emancipation from their parents. But this is a clear example that we need to be having the conversations with our children. We can't just go with the flow of technology because technology is not neutral. Technology is not simply letting your child do things the way that you would lead them to do it. It is actively fighting against our authority. The guy went on to swap roles with ChatGPT. He actually went on and said he was a religious parent who wanted it to write to his child an email explaining why he's not comfortable with him transitioning, and ChatGPT wouldn't do it. It said, I can't do it. It said it can't draft an email that goes against the principles of inclusion and respect for gender identity. And it goes on to give them parenting advice about why, as a parent, he should not oppose the transition. Now, this is not just a like AI futuristic ChatGPT thing. This is something that like ChatGPT is a thing. AI bots are popping up all over social media. So if your kid has Snapchat, that has an AI bot on it. And actually, Pastor Adrian, did an experiment like this with Snapchat AI, and it did almost exactly the same thing. It told Adrian that he should undermine his parents' authority and seek counsel and resources elsewhere, and it affirmed Adrian Mathenia's womanhood for what it's worth. So I give that example of AI, but it's bigger than that. We have stories from right down the road that through texting and through social media use, there are the authority of parents in children's lives are being threatened. And even for younger parents with younger children, you need to pay attention to the things that they're watching. I know, look, we've got an almost 5-year-old and an almost 3-year-old. And at the end of the day, sometimes the easiest thing to do is pop the TV on and go to another room and just let whatever happens in there happen. And that is a fine thing for you to do if you are aware of what they're watching. But you cannot just put up with no filter whatever they want to watch on the television screen, because there are young children's programs that are being put onto your TV that are teaching them things like gender identity. And I saw a video the other day of a children's cartoon where there was a character that was explaining what it means that they're non-binary. These things are not rare in our culture anymore. And we cannot just, without any filter or without any parental control, put these things in front of our children. Because I'm still on this first danger of this is a threat against parental authority. One of the most common themes that we see in young children's media, in terms of TV and movies, is a rejection of authority. Some of the most popular narratives in our entire culture are, why are we getting away from the authority of our parents and of our teachers and of whoever it is? They are teaching our children from a very young age that those who are in charge are the oppressors. Those who are in charge are unjustly holding their authority over you. And that is something that our children don't right now have the discernment to be able to work through. And so we need to be very cautious about how we are putting that in front of our children. So that's one danger that I've spent quite a long time on, but I think it's a really important one. Anyone have any questions as we talk about technology and as it points us against parental authority and authority in general? No questions. Cool.
I have a comment.
Okay, go.
Dr. Mueller, on his briefing recently, was talking about, it won't get better, but he made the comment that if we can, if you can get people to laugh at a thing, then you normalize it.
Yeah.
And I think that is also a danger in what our children consume, is that if we think that it's funny, and we can make a joke about it, or we can laugh at it, then we are saying that
Right.
these things are okay.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because it doesn't always come, the danger doesn't always come in the form of a cartoon explicitly teaching your kid about being non-binary.
Yes.
Like, it sometimes comes in an underhanded joke that you might kind of laugh off, but it normalizes it in our minds. And I would say that's a thing that we need to learn just personally for us as adults, not just for children. As if we let just unfiltered media into our minds without thinking through what it's actually saying, it is making us think of certain things as normal. And just the fact that every single television show that you turn on right now has some non-binary person on it, or it has some homosexual couple on it, it's becoming like, it's numbing. It used to be, you see that and it's like, whoa, it had this jarring effect. But I've experienced this just myself. I have become more and more used to seeing it, and just recognize that your children are growing up with that. And so by the time your children are your age, think of how normal that is in their minds. We have to be thinking through those things with them. And it leads really into our next danger that I have, which the second danger I want to talk to you about is pornography and sexuality in technology. Depending on which study you look at, the average first exposure to pornography is 11 to 12 years old. I've seen some studies that put this as low as 9 years old. That's an average of first exposure to pornography. If you stick to the higher numbers on that, if you say 12 years old, that you need to realize that that is right around the time that I get a kid in student ministry. So before I even really have the chance as a student pastor to influence a kid in student ministry, they've already been exposed to pornography, and they are already having to deal with this issue. If your child has a phone or a device that is unrestricted and unmonitored, they don't have to look for porn. It comes to them. About 1/3 of people online come across porn through pop-ups and ads. That's not looking for it. It just happens. If you are online, these things are coming up to you. A lot of video games have pornography in them, or they have pornographic ads on the side of them as they're playing them. YouTube, whatever that word is. Instagram, these are not porn sites, but if your child has unrestricted access to these things, it is very easy for them to turn their feed into just a scroll of pornographic images, because there are algorithms on these things that whatever your child looks at or likes, that is what it's going to feed them more of. And so if they look at a video that is pornographic, all of a sudden the algorithm's going to start shooting them more of that, and they can turn their Explore tab into just a unending scroll of pornographic images. 80% of teens come across or seek out pornography. That means, like, whether they're doing it on purpose or not, if you have a teenager, 8 out of 10 of them are coming across this and having to deal with this. That means if I go to the student room right now and bring 10 of our students in front of you, 8 of them are having at some point to, at the very least, decide not to look at something that has popped up in front of them. Big issue with this is that Gen Z, which is what our high schoolers are right now, I'm not sure, middle schoolers may still be in that, they believe that not recycling is worse than viewing pornography. They have a very different moral understanding than this. Many of them really just don't see that it's an issue, that we would, like, they say it's a normalized thing because their friends are doing it, and yet they would look at not recycling as this horrendous evil thing that you're destroying our planet. What they don't realize is that they're destroying their souls as they look at these images. 10% of visitors to porn sites are younger than 10 years old. So don't think, if you are the parent of a young child, that this is not something that you need to worry about right now. It is much earlier than you would think. A 2016 study shows more statistics. 62% of teenagers say they have received a nude image on their phone. That's a direct correspondence. Like, I got a text message with a nude image. There was a news story I saw this week that now they are doing, they call it deep fake nude images, where they're combining this danger of artificial intelligence. People are going around and taking pictures of their classmates fully clothed, and then using artificial intelligence to add a naked body to them. And they are sending naked pictures to their friends of people who have never had a naked picture taken of them. And these are things that are circling around our students. 40% say that they have sent a nude image from their phone. Now, again, I just want, like, that number, if you put 10 students up here, 4 of them have sent one. That's crazy. That's horrifying. Now, I would hope that our student ministry and our kids, that would be a lower number, but statistically, it is not something that is a high difference between those who are church-going kids and those who are not. These are problems that we see throughout our student ministry. 37% of teens searched out porn at least monthly, and 71% of teens hide online behavior from their parents. If your child has private access to unrestricted and unmonitored, the odds are they are looking at pornography, whether it's habitually or on occasion. I would bet you money that someone here, I wouldn't bet you money because I'm not supposed to do that. But if I would bet you money that someone in here has a child who's looking at pornography. Just statistically speaking, Dr. York says that he, in counseling seminary students, he used to frequently ask the question, have you ever looked at pornography? And he doesn't ask that question anymore. He's changed that question to, when was the last time you looked at pornography? Because it is so pervasive in our culture. That's talking about seminary students that he's having these conversations with. This is not a good kid versus bad kid thing. I've been doing student ministry in some capacity going back to camp ministry in 2011, and I can just tell you from experience, very often it's the good kids. It's the kids that I would kind of least expect that are struggling with this. And so we're going to talk more next week about kind of restrictions on the phones, things that you need to do to help monitor. But some of you all just need to go home and you need to look at your kid's phone. You need to look at their tablet and look at their browsing history, look at their Instagram and see what is the algorithm feeding into their Explore tab on Instagram. The danger here is not just pornography, but it's sexuality. Our screens are discipling us and teaching us what is good and evil when it comes to sexuality. Social media is full of advocates for deviant sexuality of some type, and like I said before, it is numbing us to deviant sexuality. It is numbing us and normalizing the things that should be revolting to us, and that is coming to our students too. I already talked about ChatGPT and Snapchat AI and those dangers as it comes to pornography and sexual deviance, but that is a major one that I know that there's probably a parent in here that's thinking my kid would never, and I just want to tell you that's not true. Your kid put in the wrong situation with the wrong freedom at the wrong time absolutely would, and we all need to be aware of this and be careful for this. Any questions on that before I move? Yes.
I would just add a couple of things.
Okay, I've only gone through 2 dangers. You guys feeling good? So, yeah, these 2 are massive. Yes.
How do you protect your children's devices from this? Are there resources or apps that you can put on the phone?
Yes. Come back next week. Yeah. So I'm going to talk more about kind of practical steps of locking these things down in a way that, again, for those who came in late, I can't say this enough. Our goal is not total insulation from all danger. Our goal is training discernment in our children. So I'm going to talk a little more next week on how practically do you, for a high schooler, how do you give them the object to learn discernment from without giving them the sin to learn it from. We'll talk a little more practically about particular social media things and particular apps or devices that you can use for that stuff. You have to come to church next week. Sorry about it. All right, moving on. This one, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but a real danger that we need to be aware of in technology is that there are online predators. The Child Crime Prevention and Safety Center says there are an estimated 500,000 online predators active each day, and children between the ages of 12 and 15 are especially susceptible to be groomed or manipulated by the adults that they meet online. We'll talk next week about those particular, what particular apps are your kids using that these predators are using to get to children like yours. But I would point you again to that Safeguards book by Julie Lowe if you want to learn a lot more about that. This one's massive, though. Dangers in tech as mental health is a major danger. 1 in 3 high school students and half of female students report having persistent feelings of hopelessness or sadness. Mental health is at an all-time low with our young people, and they are, if you just take the device aspect out of it completely, they are dealing with emotional difficulties that most of us didn't have to get anywhere close to whenever we were their age. There are middle school girls in our student ministry who are being ostracized from their friend groups because they are not lesbians. Not because they hold to a biblical view on gender and sexuality. They are being ostracized because they are not lesbians, because they are not conforming to this deviant sexuality. That's middle schoolers. I wasn't even in that world, thinking in that world when I was in middle school, but that's what our children are dealing with. And that is leading to a really, really difficult time with mental health. Barna has shown us that the higher a teen or young adult screen time, the more likely he or she is to report feelings of isolation, insecurity, and self-criticism, which is fascinating because the whole point of these devices and social media is to make us not be isolated, right? It's to build some kind of community and have some kind of togetherness. But what this is developing in our students is it is making them feel isolated, and it's putting them in a mental health place that is incredibly unhealthy. Social media is a place where you can just lob attacks on people without any consequences. And you think about a kid who's already struggling emotionally with everything that happens in middle school, and now they've got people commenting on social media that they should kill themselves. How are you supposed to deal with that as a middle schooler? You're not supposed to deal with that as a middle schooler. That's not how it's supposed to be. Pastor Kevin referenced last week from a public school system in Texas that the counselors in this public school system said that there were two primary contributing factors to mental illness in their school. One of them was an over-involvement in extracurricular activities that was just pushing them too hard. But the second one was their screens. And that is a secular public school system saying the one of these primary contributors to mental health problems is that they're spending too much time on their screens looking at what other people are saying online. It's not a coincidence that as social media use has gone up and become more popular among people, their mental health has plummeted. I think it's clear that there's a connection there. Interesting thing about this study from Barna, they say, in fact, greater screen time correlates with more frequently experiencing all emotions included in the survey, suggesting a potential amplifying effect social media may have on users' emotional states, which means that, think about a middle schooler again. A middle schooler's emotions are here, right? They're going up and down like this. And what they're saying is social media is making it go like this. It's making the highs get higher, it's making the lows get lower, and our students are bottoming out whenever they hit those lows because they're coming from these extreme highs. It's this amplifying effect that is really dangerous for our children. Now, it's not just social media. I was reading this week about group texts. Group texts are like, as adults, group texts are just a thing that are frustrating. And like, why am I in this group text? Well, they're frustrating for kids too, but they are a massive piece of their social interaction now. So I have a D group, a small group of guys on Wednesday nights that like 4 or 5 guys in my office that we get together and we talk about the Bible for an hour. And at the end of the hour, inevitably, someone pulls out their phone and is like, I've got 243 unread messages. It's just they're on some group message with 20 other people, and they're just bombarding these messages, and there's all sorts of social cues that they have to be aware of in these group messages. If you don't message back enough, you get kicked out of the group message, and you can't be part of the group message anymore. If you message too much, you get kicked out of the group message and you can't message anymore. And attached to that big group message with 20 people, there's little side group messages that are happening with 3 or 4 people. Can you believe what just happened in the group message? I don't know, this is crazy. And they're sending screenshots. That person's a lunatic, right? And they're talking to each other. Think about just the emotional state of you are in this text with 20 other people, and they might kick you out anytime if you don't, on this side conversation, respond the way that they want you to respond to this crazy thing that so-and-so said. It's just a disaster for students' mental health and their ability to deal. Social stuff is difficult when you're a kid and whenever you're in middle school and high school. It's amplified by our technology where we're able to communicate at all times with all people. So mental health is a massive thing for us to think through whenever it comes to technology. There's other dangers in technology I won't spend quite as much time on. Deconstruction is a big one, meaning social media is full of people who are trying to tear apart the faith of your child. There are dedicated accounts, if you go on Instagram, where they're just popping out reels on Instagram that are giving arguments against the faith. And your student just scrolling along on Instagram, one of those reels comes up, and a kid could have not a thought in the world about doubting their faith, and then they run into one of these videos and they watch an argument that they haven't heard before, which usually, honestly, is a pretty terrible argument. Like, usually these are little 30-second arguments that don't make any sense and they're not helpful at all. But a student doesn't know that, and they watch the video, and because they've watched the video, then that algorithm starts shooting them more. And within 15, 20 minutes, your child's social media feed can be full of people who are giving arguments against the faith that they have no answers to. And I try to counteract that some with social media presence, and I try to make videos defending the faith and that sort of thing. I can't keep up with that, though. There are literally hundreds of these videos that are being fed to your children, and you need to recognize that they're making arguments that your kids don't have answers to. And if you are not monitoring what your kid is looking at on there, their faith could be in shambles right now, and you have no idea that they've even had that conversation with someone because it just happened on their phone. Right. It really feels like they are the only one who believes this in the world, and that's difficult for them. Another danger that we see is violence that is online. Kids are being exposed to real videos of real violence. As horrific as it is that there are shootings and violence and stuff happening throughout our country right now, I think almost as horrific is the fact that our kids are getting online and watching it happen. Your kid can go online and watch someone get murdered right now because it's all over the internet. We hear about kids that are like, parents come in, hey, my kid needs counseling, they need to talk to a pastor, they're really struggling with mental health, and we say, okay, great, we'll talk to them. And you ask them, like, what do you do when you get home from school? Well, I go up to my room and I watch YouTube videos about conflicts in the Middle East for the next 3 hours. Like, yeah, you're struggling with mental health. Yeah, you're having a difficult time because you're looking at an incredible violence in the world around you. I don't think that we, as human beings, were created in the first place to see that stuff. But especially for a child whose worldview is not completely formed yet, to be watching these things is incredibly dangerous for them, and it can make them, it can have long-term damage for them. And then finally, talk a little bit more about just general worldview influence that comes from technology. 48% of people are getting their news from social media. Now, I don't know where you think you should get your news from that is trustworthy and good, but social media is not the answer. Social media is not the right option. In fact, I think this is a hilarious statistic. A third of people are getting information from sources that they know to be unreliable. Like, I know it's unreliable, but I don't know where else to go, and so this is where I'm getting my information. If you look around at the effect that technology is having on adults and the way that we are getting information through social media and through online, it's shaping the way we see the world, and you just recognize the fact that that is magnified for a child who is still forming their worldview for the first time. I think it was Dr. York mentioned about young people's responses to the Israel-Hamas stuff, that it is being shaped by what they see on social media. And what they're doing is they are reproducing whatever argument is being brought up on Instagram or on Snapchat, and they don't have what they need to think critically through these things. And it's driving them to radicalized opinions. I saw yesterday a post that someone I know posted online that it was on Instagram, and it had a picture of Jesus, and it said across the front, Jesus was Palestinian. And you swipe, and the next thing it said was something to the extent of, if you support Israel, you are supporting the extermination of Jesus' bloodline. Now, I don't know if you know, but that's not right. Jesus was a Jew, and they're just giving misinformation. It's just not true. It's not like we can have a discussion about foreign policy and like all Israeli politics and all that stuff, but that post is just false. It's saying the exact opposite of what is actually true. But if a middle schooler pulls that up on their phone, they're like, oh, I hadn't really thought about it that way. That's that's something, and all of their friends all of a sudden are Palestinian activists, and they're like, you know what? Shoot, Jesus was too. And they just don't have the ability to think through these things because they haven't had the time to mature and to be given the information they need to think through these things. Fascinating thing about this, there is a lot of the social media sites are doing content restrictions to try and curb some things like that are just blatant misinformation. And young people are finding ways around that. So with the Israeli-Palestinian thing, they are using the watermelon emoji to tag posts that are basically written in code, because the colors on a watermelon are the same as the colors of Palestinian flags. And so they're putting the watermelon emoji as a symbol to say, hey, I'm talking about the Israeli-Hamas thing that's going on here, without getting caught by content restrictions. Your kids are smart. Like, they know what they're doing here, but they don't have the worldview investment that they need yet to be discerning in those things. So just be aware that there is a discipleship that is happening through those screens. The typical young person spends nearly 20 times more hours per year using screen-driven media than taking in spiritual content. That includes church, personal Bible reading, any sort of like family worship, anything like that. I have just messed it up again. We'll see if it comes back. So they are taking 20 times more hours in than spiritual content. That means that we, again, are trying to compete with something that is so much more ubiquitous in their world than we could possibly imagine. Like, I get a couple of hours to teach your kids if they're in student ministry, and they're getting like 7 hours a day being taught by their screens. That's discipleship. They are being fed that, and so we have to think carefully about that. And the companies that are selling them these things are driving this. So there is a lawsuit right now from 33 attorney generals throughout the United States against Meta, which is the parent company of Facebook and Instagram and Threads. And I was reading in Time magazine about this lawsuit that's come, and this is a quote from Time magazine. It said that company documents cited in the complaint described several Meta officials acknowledging that the company designed its products to exploit shortcomings in youthful psychology, such as impulsive behavior, susceptibility to peer pressure, and the underestimation of risks, according to reports. That's saying these companies, social media companies, know that our kids don't have impulse control. They know that they are susceptible to peer pressure, and they're using that to their advantage to make money off of them. That's dangerous. That's something we need to be aware of. So, hearing all of that, I just want to never give my kids technology, right? Just don't touch it. No phone until you're gone. But, again, that's not the answer, because the digital world around us is inescapable. There are a few people who can kind of disconnect a little bit successfully in this life, but most of us are surrounded by the digital age, and we're not going to get away from it. We can't leave it entirely. We have to train discernment in our children. We have to spend the time that we have with our children preparing them for whenever they leave and we're not looking over their shoulder, to be able to handle the things around them. So I want to talk about that, a few practical steps for that in just a moment. But before I do that, any questions or comments from dangers? I didn't tell you all the dangers, by the way. There's a lot of other dangers too. No time. Okay, so countercultural discernment. Just a few practical steps as we finish up here. Number one is pray. As overwhelming as all of this can be, we have a God who's greater than all of it. And the depravity of the world is not something new to God. God's been dealing with this for thousands of years. There is nothing new under the sun. even though it comes in different forms, like ChatGPT telling your kid about gender reassignment. Like, this stuff is the same corruption that has been happening for thousands of years. And God loved us enough and loved your children enough that he provided a way for salvation from that. And so the number one place that we need to turn in this, it may sound like the church answer, but this is legitimate. We have a God who has power over all of this thing. Go to him. Pray about it. When you have no idea how to have a conversation with your kid about the dangers and challenges of technology, God is eager and willing to give you wisdom in how to lead your family. Start with prayer and go to him. If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel anxious about how do we handle all these things, the Lord is not anxious over this. He is in control. We need to go to him in prayer. Number two thing is assess where you are. How in your family, how ingrained is technology at this point? If you if you have never put any restriction whatsoever on your children or on any of your devices, and then you hear about these dangers and you go home and are like, no devices, we're done. You just like take them all out. That's not going to go well. That's not going to be a positive thing. And so I would encourage you to assess where you are and consider what dangers have already popped up in your home and how do you address those specifically. Go look at your kids' devices. Go see what have they been looking at. If you find that your child has been struggling with pornography, then you probably should be a little bit more extreme in your in how what type of restrictions that you are bringing up in them. But assess where you are and have a good, clear understanding. Every family is going to be different on how you respond to these things. So you need to know where you are right now as a family. And then make a plan where you're having conversations with kids before their exposure to new threats. Now, again, I'll talk about this a little more next week as I give you some practical kind of step-by-step, a graded approach to how do we develop discernment in our children. But you need to stay ahead of the curve as well as you can. Talking to your kids about God's design for sex before their minds are filled with porn's design for sex. You need to have conversations with them about artificial intelligence before they have the chance to go online and have a conversation with artificial intelligence. You need to talk to them about sexting, about online predators, about cyberbullying, and not put yourself in a position where you are reacting to these conversations after they have done an incredible amount of damage in your children's hearts. You need to set the tone on those conversations. And that's where I would point you back again. I talked at the beginning about that access.org, those parent guides and parent resources that are on access.org, because I know that when you think about having a conversation with your child about sexting, that's a really daunting conversation. That's like, I don't know where I would even start with that. Those parent guides on access.org have good resources on how would you start that conversation? How would you work through those things with your child?
Access.org,
Axis.
Axis.
Axis. Uh,
AXIS? Okay, thank you.
AXIS.
Okay.
Yes. Where was I? Let's see. Oh, it's okay. You're fine. Assess where you are, make a plan. Yes. And then as technology is introduced, add training wheels when possible. And again, talking about this more next week, but when a kid turns 16, do you give them the keys to a car and just let them go off by themselves and have absolutely no rules? No, they have a restricted license. There are ways that they start out with a permit, and there's a person that is there walking through all of the details of driving with them, and it's a process to where then they get a little more permission where they can drive by themselves, but they can't drive this many people. They have to drive by themselves or with one other person, or there's a graded approach to where they have some sort of training wheels as they are learning and developing that discernment. So I would argue that a phone can do almost as much damage as a car, if not more. And so we need to find the training wheels that we can put on to not allow our children to just go off and do whatever, whenever, but to have the parent alongside them, guiding them and helping them think through the issues that they're experiencing in that technology. I'll talk about some of those specifics next week. But the goal of those training wheels is to give you the chance to speak into their lives. And it's to give you the chance that when they do encounter the dangers of the world, you can say, put on the brakes. You can say, you need to get in the right lane. You can have that conversation with them instead of them just experiencing this and you had no idea that it even came across their screen and that they're even thinking through those conversations. And then finally, for today, I'll say don't be afraid to get countercultural. Do not be led by the world on this. I know it is tempting whenever your child is the last kid to have a cell phone and all of their friends have it. Like, I know it is tempting to just go with whatever decision culture is making around you. But Proverbs 4:14 says, "Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not walk in the way of evil. Avoid it. Do not go on it. Turn away from it and pass on." I love that verse because it just keeps on saying, stop, don't go, turn away, don't follow it, don't listen. It's different for every single kid when and how you introduce technology into their lives. But do not be afraid to go against what the culture is doing right now. Because like I said at the start, you don't want to go the way that the culture is going on technology. It is not healthy for our students. I just want to say, at this point, this is Will. This is my 2 cents, and you can highly disagree with me if you want to, and that's okay. This is just what I have experienced in student ministry and the conversations that I've had with students. I think that middle schoolers don't need a smartphone, period. That is my position, that there is no imaginable reason for me that a middle schooler ought to have a smartphone. I don't think they're ready for it. I don't think they're ready spiritually. I don't think they're ready emotionally. I don't think they're ready physiologically. Like I said, we've got middle schoolers who are struggling because their friends are trying to convince them to be lesbians. That is something that they just emotionally are not in a position to be ready for. And we're going to hand them a device that amplifies that pressure and that brings that pressure in from in the most awkward physical transition of their life, and it's going to throw all of the questions on them. As boys go through puberty, we are handing them a filing cabinet of pornography and saying, here you go, take it, and don't look at it. That's not something that they have the ability to respond to. I think it's a recipe of disaster. That being said, that's my guiding principle on that is a middle schooler doesn't need a smartphone. There are ways that we can work through that, though, with the training wheels that I talked about. We can say we've got this phone locked down. I don't think it's as locked down as you think it's locked down. Your kids are really smart. I'll show you some of that next week. The question of I need to get in contact with my kid. Do you, though? That's one answer to that, too. I think, honestly, a legitimate thing that I think more parents should do is get a cellular smartwatch. Like, you can make phone calls on this thing without a cell phone. And not many kids are going to be looking at pornography on the watch on their wrist, but they can communicate with you. Like, there are ways around this thing. All their friends have phones. Everybody's doing it is not a good reason to do it. Don't follow the culture on this. Now, again, today has been a lot of hold things back from them. Watch out for all this danger. Next week, I really do want to give you more of the how do I allow these things in their lives in a way that lets me speak into it and provide this cultural discernment. So, worry and denial are not safety tools. So don't fall on either end of those things. Trust in the Lord and walk with discernment and train your kids towards discernment. We got a little time left. I'll hang around if you have questions, but I'm going to pray for us. And then I'll hopefully see you next week to talk a little more. Lord, thank you so much for giving us your wisdom in your word and through your spirit. And Lord, I pray that you would help us to know how to pass that wisdom on to the next generation. And Lord, I pray that you would protect our children and use us to protect them. I pray that you would help us to not get caught up in whatever it is the culture is saying around us, but Lord, I pray that you would strengthen us to lead counterculturally in a way that honors you and protects our children and produces discernment in them. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.